So for you personally, when you came out of Ernst and Young and you got into real estate, like go back to like you then and going through that transition. What was the experience? What was great? What were your ahas? What were the struggles? What was it like?
Yeah, I often say like I was blissfully naive because I was 25, or whatever. So I was pretty young. So I didn't know what I didn't know, which was probably a good thing. It might have been a little more scary if I had known, um,
Yeah.
for sure. But I think I just took from I used to say, because it's true, when you're a consultant and you're working at UI and you go to a client site, the consultants are stuck in the closet. That's where they're put to work. They don't have offices. So I said, when I stepped out of the closet and my head was at a laptop and I realized you can create successes through relationships versus tasks, I really took that to heart. And throughout our first business we started down here to what we're doing now, it's all about relationships. We focus on how do we make other people money? How do I make other people successful? And that automatically turns around and brings us success. So I took it away quickly that you can work for somebody else, or you can still work for somebody else but work for yourself. And that's kind of how I play that day. Because if people say, "Oh, you work for yourself, it's great. You can do what you want every day." It's obviously not true. We work for our clients every day. We work for our investors every day. But you learn how to do it better, and you learn how to do it the way you want to. You have more control over it. As long as you're good at it, they'll give you some freedom on there.
Well, it's funny how when you could do it the way you want to and you're focused on doing it better, you do it better. Mm.
Exactly. Yeah, and obviously, like when you got a bigger stake in the game, there's more money to be made. There's obviously that drives. So, I mean, I would say I probably work as hard as I did at EY as I do today because that's just my personality. But a lot bigger stakes, a lot bigger opportunities for my family, for myself because of where I am today. But the work ethic can't really change or be any different.
No, and sometimes I think it's more and it's more
Yeah,
fun.
it is way more fun. There's no doubt in that. Way more.
So what was your like to say like to be a successful agent when you came in? I mean, I love like not to beat on it, but I think it's very relevant words you use like cadence versus float. I think some people get in and they think they're just floating is what it is, and you just kind of float and the money just keeps hitting you.
Yeah.
And you came from a different world. What was your biggest like? This is what I think it's going to be, and this is what it is, or was it what you thought it would be? What were your lessons? What'd you learn?
So I mean, I was a little bit blissfully naive. I didn't really realize how
Yeah.
cutthroat and tough it really is. But I did quickly realize you got to create a niche. You got to make what's your secret sauce? What makes you special? I fortunately love design, construction, creative. I'm a super left brain analytical guy, but I have this little bit of design creativity, maybe growing up watching Flip or Flop or whatever, I don't know. But I, I wanted to create that niche of what was my own. So I knew when coming into the real estate world, hey, if you want to be successful and how do you make money, how do you differentiate yourself? So my path was via development, construction, renovation. So I had this play where I was going to build a bunch of homes in a really high visibility area, stick as many signs as I could across 30A, and create a splash really quickly that way to create my competitive advantage. And fortunately, it worked. The timing was perfect. I went from most of the top agents here not knowing who I was to some dude called me and said, "Dude, where do all these signs come from? Like, whose properties are these?" And I, took a different approach where I put a bunch of investors together, bought a bunch of properties, and used that as a launching bar for sales and brokerage as well as on the development side.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. And I think that's where you took what you did with Ernst and Young and
Yeah,
immediately it's like, look at so many people think, okay, that's gone. And okay, now I got to start all over and do something else. And you did anything but that.
yeah. And I use essentially all of the tools and analytics and investment analysis that we use in our role as financial analysts, converted that to the real estate construction world, got some guys who believed and trusted in me and in the market, and that really kind of springboarded everything.
So question, because I think about as a real estate agent was, by the way, but is we were talking about that earlier, but coming into that, you're doing investments because I think a lot of real estate agents love this, but you took what you did at Ernst & Young, advising people and being a consultant and being numbers driven and CPA and all that good stuff. How did you, did you ever have a moment where you were like, okay, am I getting this right? Or did you know you were getting this right? Because you're asking other people now personally to put their money in something, invest, and your whole career is, I mean, that's a bit kind of a risk. Did it feel like a risk? Or in your world, what were the risks? What were the wins? How did you decide what to do and how to go about it? How did you know?
Well, as a college kid, I was in college during the recession, so a lot of what we learned in school was really focused around that. So obviously, like, very nervous, ton of risks going on. But I mean, I just kind of went back to the basics of this is what the numbers say, this is what the analytics like, this is what we can do. It should prove out. We had a lot of safety nets. We're in a short-term rental market where our safety was we can rent it if we can't sell it. It's still kind of our focus in what we do. So there was safety nets built into the investment model. But again, I knew that I wasn't going to come into the market and have everybody trust me with their listings. So I had to create my own portfolio of listings in order to build both a development business and a real estate sales business. And so it was, I left UI and I didn't really have an option to do anything else. So this was the way to make it happen. So I was, focused on making it happen.
Well, something you just said too is sometimes having the biggest limitations, but that literally like laid out your opportunity for you to do that.
And I had really good mentors and partners along the way as well. So that was obviously a big play. And I'm very observant. So I'm not, what I do and what most agents or brokers do, we're not the founders of real estate sales or the founders of development, right? Like, it's been going on a long time, but if you observe what successful people are doing in different types of businesses and you implement that or make it even better or take little pieces from everybody and create your own strategy from it, there's something to say. There's success there. There's obviously risk along the way, but nothing I do or have done is mind-blowing. It's just a lot of hard work, learning from others, being observant of the market and what other successes are, and then putting a strategy together to implement that for yourself. So, I still do that today, try to learn from everybody around me.
So strategy number one was, just to repeat what you said, well, there's a few things I want to repeat for everybody. Number one, find your cadence. Discipline equals freedom. Don't float.
Yeah.
I mean, you can, but that's not really the greatest strategy, and have a strategy. You came in the business and you looked at your situation. You said, okay, I need to make money now and fast, and I've got a skill set that I can bring forward into this industry. And in doing that, you came up with a strategy and a plan for investors. And you actually, when everybody said it was a terrible time, it was a great time because the market was just coming back. So you bring investors together, that gives you a portfolio immediately, and then you sell real estate and you're in. And here there you go, back to number one, you don't let grass grow under your feet. Now, number two, carrying that forward, when you look at strategies, what have you learned throughout the business? Because you've grown quickly. And how do you strategize? What is it? Do you have a formula? Or when you see something, what are the parts that you look at? How do you go 50,000 feet high? Or give us what that looks like for you and how you do it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty in the weeds every day. And obviously, as the market changes, strategy changes. But right now, inventory is king. So I'm focused on inventory creation. So whether that's through construction, redevelopment, new listings, and we've been able to grow our brokerage because we are providing inventory to our agents. This market, as great as small boutiques are, we've learned that it's very hard in a market. So my role and my partnership and what I do, both on the development side as well as on our brokerage side, is create inventory. So go get listings, go build houses, go do renovations. And I think if you can, even in a good market, if you focus on that, it's sustainable. If I can always be creating inventory, both on the development and the listing side and the sales side, there's always money to be made for both me and the rest of our team.
I love that. So literally, I just asked you the question, and there's this, I think it's Jordan Peterson or somebody talks about it, or a lot of people, when you say priority, it's really came from the singular word. And you had one priority. It was very simple, inventory creation. The strategy from day one has been inventory creation. So in a market now where we literally it's like, if I look at the Realtor or Zillow or whatever app shows homes for sale, it's like the other day, just for fun, I was looking, I was like, oh, maybe I forgot to put the active on the filter. No. These are because everything was pending. I was like, no. I'm not looking for pendings. I want to see what's active. No, they're pending. So in this market,
yeah, we'd say now that MLS and Zillow are almost irrelevant. I mean, 50% of our deals are sold in the office. Another 25% are sold off market, broker to broker. I mean, it is, it's interesting. It's truly different than we've ever seen.
And when you in knowing that, what would you say? Are there any elements? Obviously, the relationships. Obviously, being in front of the deals before they ever get here, like before they're even built.
Yeah.
But what are some other? Is there this is what you need to know? The 3 things you need to keep your eye on to keep on top of this inventory creation and awareness?
I mean, I think relationships number one. I mean, relationships give me the opportunity to have new listings, to know about deals before other people know about deals, to find construction opportunities, to find development opportunities. So, I mean, being connected, being involved in the community, and then relationships from that, obviously number one. And then number 2 is know your numbers. Really, I can quickly see a deal and know that it works or it doesn't work. I am a numbers guy, like I'm a spreadsheet guru, Excel nerd, whatever. So it comes a little easier to me, but I do tell our agents, even in the most basic form, you got to know your numbers so you can quickly react, especially in today's market. You can quickly react to an opportunity because if it's a good opportunity, it ain't going to last very long. So you need to know that it's a good opportunity so that you can move. I'm diving deep in our market every night at home after my kids go to sleep. I have a team that's scrounging for opportunities and deals and vacant land opportunities and redevelopment opportunities pretty much every day. And it's just being in front, being front of mind, forefront. I have a pretty interesting example. I have the guy that does inspections for us, knows that we do construction renovation, called me and said, hey, I have a friend who I had to do an inspection for, and she's in over her head and wants to sell her house because it needs to be renovated. It came from the inspector. Never would have anticipated that. But making sure people in the market and the community know what I do. I don't just sell real estate. So that brings in more opportunities for additional types of businesses.
So a couple of things in there, but you were talking about relationships, know your numbers, and in that, combining your relationships and knowing your numbers creates opportunities.
Yeah.
And number 1, every relationship. A lot of times people like to label things like this is where this comes from, this is who these people are. But especially in real estate, like the opportunities and the deals always come from where you least expect, or often if you open your eyes and look at them.
And it's even more in our community because it's a small, tight-knit community. So, there's not pockets of friends or there's demographics. I mean, my friends are much older than me and much younger than me. So because it's so small, it comes in every kind of form and fashion.
Yeah. And you talked about relationships and knowing your stuff, knowing your numbers. So what is your biggest? So for example, there's in some markets there are more real estate agents than homes that sell. I think in Aspen, for example, there may be in 38 or in this one. But how do you make sure that knowing your numbers and having your relationships, what is the activity, or how do you make sure you get traction and formulate that into a deal? And that's advice for people who are looking at doing bigger, better deals, or people who've never done a deal.
Yeah, I mean, I think again, it's being educated, knowing your stuff, focusing on making your clients money. So whether I'm getting them in with great equity on the front end, whether I'm teaching them how to find a renovation opportunity, whether I'm doing that myself, creating value on the front end, buy right, create equity on the front side. It leads to great reviews from your customers, really happy investors, really happy customers, and ultimately a lot more money for yourself and for your clients. And that's what everybody's focused on, right? It's their biggest asset they're purchasing, whether it really is an investment or not an investment. They want to feel good that they have a lot of equity in that property. And so if you're just selling something to sell something, A, you don't know what you're selling is problem 1. B, you don't know if you're really getting your client the right deal. It will bite you in the butt eventually. It's going to come back around. You're just a sales guy, and there's nothing wrong with being a sales guy, but you don't really know the market. You don't know what you're doing. And there are times where I tell a client, hey, this is way overpriced. I don't think you're going to be in a tight spot. And they say, oh, I don't care. This is the house I want. That's great, but having those
Yeah.
conversations with your clients and making sure they're educated is super important.
Making sure they know what they're buying,
Yeah,
and to reiterate what you said, the demand is there,
yeah,
but
totally.
understand what the demand is and what people want, and making sure because as real estate agents, the reason why Zillow never took over, or whoever, is because we are the context, we are the information.
Sure.
You can't look at a piece of real estate and understand it at the level that you can when you're a real estate agent and you understand deals and you have the relationship and understand the client.
That's
And
right.
then you're able to put it, but the demand is always there. It's just a matter of helping that come together with that.
That's a really good point. Yeah, I
Right.
love that. Yeah.
So I would like the word that kept when I was listening, it was like demand. It's like understanding the demand. You have to know the market and understand what the demand is, and you
Yeah.
cultivate the deal.
Understand the product for sure.
What is it that made you successful? Because you were incredibly successful, and sure, there was some luck, but that doesn't come alone.
Yeah, no, for me, I guess I saw early on, and even before real estate, that I had the ability to create loyalty and lead people. I knew that. When I played softball for a local place, I ended up being the manager. I always think I ended up running everything every time I got involved in something, and it kind of told me that there was something else there besides the specific of selling real estate. And when I got into my first company, people would come to me for advice. Well, I drove a truck. I don't, but they still trusted me for advice. So I realized that I had something where I could lead, and it was a moment in my life when I just said, you know what, this isn't. I maybe am not the best salesperson, but I could certainly figure out how to lead a team to success. And I kind of all the way through Realty had that good fortune of having teams that were always number one or number two in whatever we did every year, and they were loyal. That was a big thing to me, is loyalty, because I'm a street guy, and that's a big deal to me. But if people are loyal to me, then I'm loyal to them, and we figure it out together. And it's always been one of the qualities I kind of watch most closely when I interview people or I see people. Like, you can almost get a sense of whether it's all about me, or it's about let's get this done together and everybody can be successful. So that was always my philosophy, is it takes a team to do everything, And
Yeah.
I just carried that through. And again, as an agent, like I said, I wasn't a terrible agent, but the people you talk to are amazing. And I was never an amazing person. That would never been our concept.
That's not true. That's not true, but that's what all amazing people say, is they're not amazing, everybody else is. But there you go. Which leads me to a question I was just thinking is, you are to accomplish what you've accomplished and be who you are and do what you've done, you're so incredibly humble. And I find there are people who are humble to the point of undermining themselves, and you're not that kind of humble. I mean, what can you tell us about being humble and how you can keep your humility and be the leader that you are? And in being the leader that you are, ego is clearly not taken over.
Yeah, this is the part where I'll have to not be emotional while I talk about it. But it's not hard to be humble. It's about remembering to be humble. And I'm not saying I'm humble. You said that, I'll use that word. But the reality is, I never forget where I came from. I never forget how I got here. I feel like I'm blessed that I am where I am right now, to be honest with you. It's just amazing. But I can look back and remember swimming. I told you, I learned to swim in a fire hydrant. So there was a time in my life, and I didn't know that wasn't a good thing, to be honest with you. I told my wife and I talked about that. We didn't know, She
That's awesome, though. I love that. That's so refreshing. Some kids need to be doing that again. I'm just saying,
Yeah. My wife grew up the same way, so we have that conversation where we laugh about, how, if you look back, how rough our lives were, but we didn't know they were rough. We enjoyed them. But
exactly.
Looking back, you realize, and you don't forget that stuff. And then there were rough times throughout my life. With, like I said, even in 2008, when everything was crashing, that was one of the worst times of my life, my personal life. I'm looking at my children. Two of them were getting ready to go to college, and all of a sudden, it didn't look like it was going to happen, or I wouldn't be able to help them. And it was a terrible feeling to be helpless like that. So I remember, I don't forget that stuff all the way through. And I'm very fortunate now. We have a great company. I have great agents. With all the competition around us, the fact that everyone kind of stays together means so much to me. And it's just, I feel so blessed that way. But I also know it's because we are very choosy on who we pick and bring and join us. We're not just signing names up. They have to go through quite an interview process, including talking to myself or Paul at some point, and then we decide whether we move forward. And so far, we've maintained the level that we want within our company of what we call a white glove service, but more importantly, people that have a moral compass and they do the right thing. And I'm not religious by any means, but for me, it's, treat people the way you want to be treated, and we try to stick with that when we bring someone aboard.
Yeah, and clearly you do that, and it's almost always says it's like kind of like a law of physics. It just, what you put out to the world, it really tends to come back.
Yeah, no, I agree with that.
In being a leader, you've said words like leading people, learning, remember people do more together. We do more together, and you have a value and you see what everybody who comes to the table has to offer. And it sounds like when they don't, it's not a contemptuous thing. It's just, hey, this isn't the right place for you, and it's a disservice to you and everybody else for you to stay.
Right. And that's just how we say it. It's not the right fit for you or me. And neither one of us would benefit from it. Let's just move on and be friends. We're all in the same circles.
What would you say in leadership?
But I had my teams.
No, you're saying.
No, I was just saying the teams in. Go ahead, Jere. I'm sorry.
No, you go. There's a layover, I think, in us talking, and so you think I'm interrupting you, but I'm not. So tell your story again so we can hear it, because you're talking about a team.
Yeah, the teams in Realty, when I got on the franchise sales side, it was all based on numbers, and it was literally quarterly. So all of these teams had hit numbers every quarter. And when I went in there, it was kind of like I don't know, a nice word to say, but it was a very cutthroat business. And the leaders of the teams essentially went through teams every 6 months, because they wouldn't hit their number by the 6th month. They'd hire a whole new team. I saw that, and it didn't make any sense to me. It was like, why would I put my time and effort into someone for 6 months and then start over again? So I was the anomaly there, that my teams, when I was there for 6 years in franchise sales, those same teams were in place when I left. No one left. And now, obviously, they've all gone different ways. But so I didn't have to reteach and relearn, but it took extra effort to make them feel like, you know what, if they were in a jam somewhere trying to get something done, I got on a plane and went there and helped them finish it. And they always knew I had their backs. So the loyalty thing was there, and we hit our number every quarter, and I lost barely anyone. And the other teams would shift every 6 months. There'd be new people. And that was the philosophy. So we kind of went against the grain in a lot of the ways that they ran it. But it was hugely successful for me, because if you can embrace the people that work for you, they're going to embrace you back. And we're going to figure it out together. And it's kind of what I've always believed.
So on that's in team building. So you've said so many, I love talking to you, because there's so many things that I feel like you just take for granted in the way you are and think and do things that we can all learn so much from. For example, you're talking about, you had teams where, you talked about when people run things on meeting a quota, they're doing it to avoid missing what their intuition would tell them about what goes wrong, and to avoid that. But what happens is the opposite. It's just destructive. And in running teams, anyone that's done it or dealt with people, it's still not easy. You can't just be nice to people and think they're going to show up and do their job. Nope. So, because that's just not how it works. But you can't just say you didn't meet your numbers, you're out either.
Right.
That hurts so what is it? I mean, you said embrace who works for you and having their backs, that's huge. But how do you, because sometimes you, like we said, you don't want to retain the wrong people, right, but you want to keep the right people. And is there, obviously you're good at it, but is there something tangible that you can give us that you recognize or that you've even learned over the years about that?
You know, it was about being honest with people. Like if someone wasn't putting the effort forth, they knew it. I wasn't a wilting flower by any means. I would tell them that you have to do your job, and here's how you have to do it. I always called it firm but fair. You know, that's what I was. I made sure
firm but fair.
Made sure they understood what the job was and what they had to do. And it was my job to make sure that they actually stayed on track. And if they didn't, then that plane that I took to help them would be the same plane I went in to say, hey, get your act together here, because we're not going in the same direction, and I will have to do something if that happens. And generally, if someone has that inner workings inside them, they fire that up and they do it again. And again, it's all who you pick as well. Like I would be careful who I picked to replace someone if they did leave, to get the right team. And it's fun for me. 15 years later, since I left there, there's two of them out there that are very successful. And when I call them, they still call me boss, which is,
Oh, wow.
means so much to me. They don't even know it, but it just means a lot to me that 15 years away from them and they're still calling me boss,
Yeah, I love that. I mean, it's a loyalty and just working together and being together and having that consensus. What would you say, looking back, because clearly you kind of were born in a way that you naturally, I think you have this way of embracing people and having gratitude for what they bring to the table that makes you a great leader, and that way of being humble, but knowing how to be firm but fair. But like, is there an example of something just really went bad and or can you give us something that, like, don't tell us all the horrible things that happened unless you want to, but what is something that's happened where it looked rough and it's just a specific story that you can go there and be there and say, this is where I was, and then this is what I learned and carried forward through my business that is a reason for so much of my success now?
There's been so many stories. I don't know which one I could.
And that was a bit broad. I mean, because we've talked about 2008. We talked a little bit about, if you would share with us because you came from growing up rough to you made it to college and didn't really make it out, but you still, despite not even having your focus on that, but the rest of the world wanted it for you, end up in the corporate world. Yeah. And you talked about how you went to interviews and there was a certain, especially, in the 70s, like people thought a little bit differently about, I mean, even now in the corporate world, but give us a little bit about that, about your interviews and how you kind of handled climbing that corporate ladder a little bit and what you learned from it.
It's a badly kept secret now, but I didn't talk about any of my background through most of my life, including, I think, my first interview with Century 21 back when I was, that first job. No one asked me for a real legitimate resume. I went in and met with people. I was always fortunate that they knew me. I was there with them for 4 years as a manager, going through their courses, having fun with them, hanging out with them. So the interview process was probably a little more easy for me. And they hired me, and I was shocked they hired me. So once I got in there, now you had to produce to not be called out, I guess, my whole life. So I probably worked harder than most people work to make sure that no issue ever came up. So I always tried to be on the front of everything and, on top of everything, running everything perfectly, because I never wanted anyone to have to say, well, we're going to move you to another position. Why don't you share your resume? I hid that for, as I said,
wow.
Until I was 60. I didn't tell anyone any of that.
That's amazing. Yeah.
Colleen Barry's the one that convinced me to make that little video. And I literally, when it went out, I was petrified, because I thought, I'm in this position with this brand that is phenomenal. And I'm not the one, I don't really have the background to be there. And it went the whole other way. The video was a home run. People loved it. And I realized I wish I hadn't hit it. Well, I would have had to hide it way back when, but I wish I would have talked about it sooner than, but it's been wonderful. It was a relief for me. Once I got out there, now I was relieved that I could be myself. I always am myself, but there's always that reserved part of me that would say, I'm not going to speak too much here and have someone ask me a question that I couldn't answer. And now I'm so much more comfortable. It's the best thing I ever did in terms of my life and in what my professional life.
Holding sales records and selling the first $100 million property in the country. You saw things other people didn't see, good or bad, and you didn't let what they saw impact who you really were and what opportunity really was, or define it.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons that I love about Silicon Valley is that it's a meritocracy here, and everybody is from somewhere, and all they want to know, where I used to live in LA, and LA, it's it's what you drive or what you wear or what kind of jewelry you wear, and here it's like the first thing people are like, where'd you go to school? And so It's a totally different. That vibe is so so cool that I thrive in that environment, because it's about what are you doing? What can you do? And so when I'm selling, I'm not selling anything, because the best things that I always have heard throughout my life from people is like, you're not like a salesperson, which is the biggest compliment you can give to somebody, unfortunately, because I think that, I don't know if it's Hollywood or whoever, but that our profession has a little bit of a tarnish on it. But I think that, every profession probably has a little bit of it. I mean, lawyers get their share of it as well, right? So you just move on, and you don't think about, you only think about the people. You don't think about price, and that's the thing about luxury. If you're intimidated by price, then the trouble is not with the industry; it's just with you. You got to get out of that shell.
Oh, the problem's
Right?
not with industry. If you have a problem with price, the problem's not with the industry. It might be with you, and that's not an accusational judgment. That's
No, it's
a
just something to work on. It's just something you need to work on. And so when this current week, I was fortunate enough to be called to an interview for a $20 million listing, and my first question one of my first questions is, hey, why me? Why did you call me instead of somebody else? And he looked at me, he goes, do you know so-and-so? I'm like, yeah. He said, well, he's a friend of mine. We grew up together. We went to school together. I'm like, he's one of the absolute top real estate agents in the area. He goes, yeah, I know. So I called him and said, hey, who do you think I should give this to? He said, call Arthur Sharif. I think he'll do a great job for you. And so, I think you win the admiration of your colleagues, and for another colleague to do that for you, instead of saying, hey, let me introduce you to this guy and then try to get a referral fee or anything like that. It just shows you the level of confidence that somebody had in you. And I was blown away that happened.
Well, it also is a reminder in our industry of like the other agents are sure we compete. I say we still, but anyway, we compete, but really and truly, brokers are allies. We're doing deals with one another.
I tell people during the interview, they say, well, we've interviewed so-and-so. I said, listen, when we come to your home, we are all competing agents, and we tell you about what we can do. I said, but as soon as you sign the listing agreement, we all become cooperating agents. We all try to sell your home. There is no me versus them. It's we. It's only me until you sign the document. And after I talk to you, my next call is to my colleagues. Those are the folks that are very important to me, and they are the ones that I really count on to help me help you.
I've never heard it put that way. I love, because once you sign, I mean, that almost sounds like
from competing to cooperating.
But understanding, like, when you hire me, now you choose the person you want representing you, but when you hire me, now you bring in the whole community of agents. And the reality is, when you hire the person who has the best relationships in the community, you bring in all the agents.
That's the point, is that if you can convince the seller that you have a stellar reputation among the brokerage community, that should be a huge feather in your cap, if you will. And you, I've just I'm like, duh, but the way you phrased it is so reinforces the point of why our industry has been so long-standing. It's so long-standing is because when you hire the right agent, you hire the agent who works well with the other agents. Otherwise, you're eliminating yourself from everybody. Exactly. And as an agent, it's kind of important to remember that for your own career. It's really important for me to remember that, because my story is that I was the only Sotheby's agent in the peninsula at one time, the only one. And so when people would go into the listing presentation, their immediate thing was, oh, you don't want him. He's not, his office is in the city. And so I needed to be more cooperative than most of my colleagues, because I was kind of like the Lone Ranger here. But you know, I like to think that my presence here invited the other Sotheby's affiliate brokerages to open brokerages in our community.
Wow. So I mean, so do you think was that your experience that really drove it home for you and reinforced that? Because it could do one or the other. It could make some people bitter, like Lone Ranger, doing my thing, or is there like a moment or a story where it all came together?
Well, the thing is that we have to remember that every agent, and that's what really kind of gets me when people knock the industry. The industry is not really an industry. It's one of the most loosely knit industries that I know of. Every agent is a small business. So if you like small business, you should love the real estate business, because there's thousands of us. We're all small businesses. We don't, pollute. we're
Well, we drive our cars around, but I mean, get a Tesla. I don't know.
Exactly. But so we are, and so that's where this whole thing starts. You're a small business. As a small business, if you want to raise, you get in front of the mirror and say, I need a raise, and you go out and get one. You can't rely on your brokerage. You can't rely on anybody. You got to rely on yourself. And when you think about it that way, then yes, it's easy to become a lone wolf type of a person. But really and truly, there's no one that you must rely on. You have to be self-reliant in every sense of the word. Because if you need to run to get advice on everything, then you're just maybe need to work on some of the things that you shouldn't need to, because being an independent business person means you got to be the problem solver no matter what the problem is. And that's what, being an entrepreneur, that was like an easy thing. I was like, yeah, I've done that for years. That's all I did.
What problem? Opportunities. Mr.
Exactly.
Opportunity. I mean, really. Okay, so I think it was 2012 that the first $100 million property sold in our country, and it was you. You were the broker.
My sister and I.
Your sister, you and your sister.
Yeah.
So, how did that happen?
So
what's the story?
The story is this: the owner, husband and wife, they have this $85 million property, and they have another $85 million property in Hawaii. So they called us in, they called some other people in, and they said, we have this property, and whichever one sells first, we're going to keep the other one. I'm like, oh no, that's terrible, because you could do all this work and the other house sells first. And then they said, rule number 2, no one can know about this. I don't want it in newspapers, magazines, radio,
Every
TV.
real estate agent's dream.
Right,
Somebody, we might just not sell it.
Yeah.
And don't let anybody know about it. But sell it.
So because sometimes anyway, we'll go into that later. So anyway, they he said, you can't put it out there. So I'm like, okay, fine. So we knew that it was a ticking clock on two points. And number one is that the other house sells first. Number 2 is by having our hands tied, he may get frustrated and say, hey, nothing's going on. We need to move on or something. So, but we reached out to the brokerage community, reached out to the brokerage, all the people, and they reach out to us. And so there's one agent who I've done quite a bit of business with, and he said, I've got a client that's like, money is no object. I'm like, yeah, great. He says, oh yeah, this guy will spend 30 million, 25 million. I'm like, well, if he's got 30 million, he doesn't have enough to buy this. He goes, really? I'm like, yeah. I said, this is an $85 million property, and there are 2 lots on either side of it that are $7.5 million each, for a total of $100 million. And so anyway, the people come, I give them this big grand tour, really dramatic, and and then they love it. They absolutely love it. And they did 100 different inspections and all of this. And after it's all said and done with, they said, we'll give you 95 million. And the owner's like, okay, we'll take that. I'm like, no, if you take that, you have 2 things can happen. Number 1, he'll think that he paid too much. Or number 2, he may just walk away thinking, I just don't, this is just like it's just too easy. Maybe it's just not even, it's not supposed to happen. So we came back with the $100 million, and they said, can you substantiate it? Yes, we can do this. This is the architect. This is this. And anyway, at the end of the day, they said, okay, fine, $100 million. Next thing you know, we're all celebrating and having a great time and, patting each other on the back.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I love that. So a few things. Somebody comes to you, because here's the thing, everybody has their situation. I'm talking a lot about problems today because I love to reinforce the way that everything comes your way. It's almost like you just don't, in a very good way, you don't see no. Or you see the no, but you don't see it you don't see no as the end, you see no as the door to opportunity.
Exactly, because I'm open to it. I mean, somebody and people around here, they're like, you're so lucky. Let me just rub against you. I'm like, don't do that. They're like, why? I'm like, because if I'm lucky, your luck will come to me and I have too much luck.
Oh my God, even that, I was like, because most people are like, why? Because my bad luck will rub on you? No, like, you see the luck, you don't see the problem. You see, I love that.
Yeah,
oh my God, I love that. Well, so I don't know if you know who Jordan Peterson is, but he says, what you see determines on your aim and your focus. You're focusing on, you've got problems and opportunities everywhere. You decide to look and focus on opportunities, and that's what you see. And when you see it, that's what you work with. That's what becomes more and more of your reality, and it perpetuates. Exactly. It's not like you haven't had challenges.
No, I've had more challenges than most folks, but it's just an outlook, right? Your positive outlook. It sounds cliche-ish that the glass is half full, but I always look at the positive because I've seen too many, Aristotle said, we are what we reportedly do. Excellence then is not an act, but a habit. You just be that person and it'll happen for you. It's just, you just have to be open to it. And the old saying, half or whatever is just showing up. You got to show up. And I show up.
And reiterate what you said, because you show up, but you've got the be positive people. They're just making stuff up in their head because there is reality. And then there's people like in here's what Jere Metcalf is reading and interpreting. You've seen an awful lot of reality. It hasn't all been bright and shiny and beautiful, but you've also seen within that reality the beauty. You don't just see what isn't there. You see what could be and can be, and you hone in on that part of it. And did you learn that somewhere, or because you literally in everything, you hone in on what could be and how to make it happen, and you go at links I think most people would not. Because you're like, oh, okay, well, if that's what I've got to do it, okay, then I'll do that. And you just do that. Where did that come from? Or how did you come about?
I think it's probably from being competitive and not wanting to lose. So I'm a very, very competitive person. I participate, in sports, and in sports, losing is not an option. That's the mentality I always go by. But more importantly, I think it's my personality where I want to please. So if I sell your $100 million home, that makes you happy. If it makes you happy, it makes me happy. And so, and that may be like my biggest trait, in that I love to have fun, and I always get teased about this. Yeah, there's only one person, the person that laughs the loudest at my jokes is me. and sometimes you say, okay, well, if the joke is not infectious, the laugh will be infectious. so I get them to happiness that way. So
I love that. That's so.
I'm like a kid,
like you just said. It's everything you just said. That's so true. I love that. So in your career and or life, what is the biggest lesson and or challenge that you've overcome?
The challenge is nothing is so serious. I tell you this to everybody, we're not brain surgeons. If we fail, no one's going to die. So that's the starting point. No one's going to die. So things are not that bad. And so the challenges that you learn from is like my illness in 2008 when I lost a big chunk of my net worth in the real estate meltdown. Those things, right? For some people it may have been devastating, but for me it was like that. Look in the mirror, like, hey, at least it's not cancer. So you just have to look and say, things could always be worse. I mean, I had financial problems, and all of these other things, and went to the doctor, and the doctor said, and at that time, the financials, I'm like, this can't get much worse than this. And next thing you know, is, oh, you have cancer. I'm like, well, I guess it could get worse than this.
Even for Mr. Positive.
Yeah. And so those things teach you to understand what the important things are. And then once you have that, then you don't take anything too seriously. And most importantly, you don't take yourself too seriously. You're not going to be self-depreciating, other than maybe in a joke or something. But you just realize that, hey, everything's going to be okay. All you have to do is just be patient and keep working the process. And the process has proven itself in the past. It'll prove itself again.
Which goes back to excellence and habits.
Yeah.
And what you just said was understand what the important things are.
Exactly.
So there are a couple of quotes that you've given before. Now I'm just remembering one of them. So I'm going to say it. We also are going to do the final three. But before we do the final three, I just want to, because we've talked offline about things, and we talked about when you're working with people, and you've said this in training and working with other people, you're mentoring and other agents, and it's not about treating other people the way you want to be treated. It's about treating other people the way you would want them to treat your mother.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite ones. And I've always tried to instill that in my sales training, because I've trained a lot of young people. Some of them even encouraged me to write a book. And like the old saying, the customer is always right. Okay, that's a good thing to live by, right? Another good thing is, treat everybody the way you want to be treated. That's good. But let's take that one step further and say, let's treat everybody the way we want our moms treated. Well, what is the distinction there? The distinction is that there's an extra level of care that you and I don't expect somebody to hand me their seat. But if somebody hands their seat to my mom, it wouldn't shock me. It'd make me happy, and that person to me is a good person. So treat people in terms of sales. What that means is slow the process down for that person. Respect that person's ability to comprehend at a different level, because you do this every day. They do this once every 20, 30 years, and make sure that they understand. And the way I make my mom understand, because my mom sometimes, I'm like, explain to her, and she goes like, you understand? She goes, yes, I understand. I'm like, okay, if you understand, I want you to explain to me what I just said. Because if she can explain it to me, then I know she can understand. That's the old expression, like the only way somebody knows something is, if your mom can explain it to you after you've explained it to her, then they really understand. And so those are the little things that I always try to live by.
Thanks for listening to the Jere Metcalf podcast, where top real estate agents tell how they do it. Powered by Breakthrough Luxury Coaching, this podcast was created for real estate agents across the world, coming together, sharing ideas that take their businesses to the next level. Breakthrough Luxury Coaching and membership provide luxury real estate agents tools and resources that win more business, increase volume and sales prices, and create results. To learn more, go to getstarted.breakthroughluxury.com.